Welcome, I'm Lisa with OESD and I'm glad you're here. Today we are going to be making a block out of the Leafy Appliques quilt by K Facet. I love this quilt, it's beautiful, it is hanging right here behind me, and this is a great way for getting rid of some of that K fabric stash that you've been holding on to. I know I have a stash, and please feel free to respond in the comments in the chat if you too have a stash. Even if you are not a K Facet fan, that's okay, because we also have some inspiration to show you different ways of using this collection without necessarily using K Facet fabrics. So let's go into the supplies that we need to make a block for this quilt. We are going to be using our Applique Fuse and Fix. We're going to be using Ultra Clean and Tear, Fusible Woven, tearaway tape, the perfect scoring tool, the grippy grid. We're going to use our press cloth, and then of course the instructions. That is one printout. The thread chart is the other printout, and you are going to need both. One thing about the instructions that I'm going to mention is that there's something like 100 pages. You don't want to print out 100 pages. So here I've actually printed out the first 14, 15 pages. That gives me the instructions for making the quilt. And then I printed out on Applique Fuse and Fix the pages that I needed, and there'll be a little bit more on that in a second. And then I printed out just the one page that I'm going to use for the thread chart. In this particular instance, we're going to be making block 11, which I have printed out right here. And I'm actually just going to fold this in half, and that's going to help keep me organized as we continue to make the block. Organization is the key to the whole thing today. So while I go ahead and clean all of this up, I'm going to get ready, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, so I mentioned that we were going to make block 11 out of the Leafy Appliques quilt by K Facet. One of the great things about this project is, again, you're using small scraps of fabric. So I have a bunch of small scraps here, and I'm also going to use variegated thread just for today. It'll kind of help give a visual of the block as we're making it. You'll notice that on the thread chart, when you have that printed up, that it just has one thread color for the whole thing. And that's because you, again, are the chef of your own dish, so, or you're the creator of your own make. You are going to choose what thread color you would like to use. For example, for the vase in that block, I'm going to use purple, so I'm going to use a purple variegated isocord thread. I love isocord thread actually because I have less lint in my machine, and when you do as much embroidery as I do, that is super important. The other thing that we're going to do today is we're going to be doing applique, and I just want to take a moment to talk to you about applique. We are going to be printing out on our Applique Fuse and Fix, and I just want to mention a couple things about that too so that it's successful. Prep is the whole kit and caboodle, organizing and prep. The thing about the Applique Fuse and Fix, I love this product, and we are using it today for a couple of reasons. One of the things that I want to mention is that I could use soft web, and I love soft web. It's great for applique, it's really drapeable, and it's a great product for certain kinds of applique. The one thing that I'll say about it and why I'm not using it today is that we're going to be doing a lot of placement lines, and I want to make sure that that applique that I'm making is repositionable, and you'll see as we go through that Applique Fuse and Fix is a great repositionable product. The other thing that I want to mention about it is that you see the Applique Fuse and Fix, it's got a glossy paper side and then it has a glue side. I love this product, but if you've ever had a jam, I'm going to tell you a couple of tips right now to help you. With the Applique Fuse and Fix, when you go to print up your instructions, and again, these are beefy instructions, you're not going to print out all 100 pages. But if you print out, say, the 14 or 15 that I have here, what's going to happen is that your printer is going to get really heated up. And then what that's going to do is it's going to activate the glue on your applique fuse and fix, and then that, as it goes through your printer, is going to get it all gummed up. So what I recommend is print up your instructions, print up your thread chart, give it a rest, pause, let it cool down, and then only put in one sheet at a time and print that one applique fuse and fix sheet at a time. You're also going to notice in the instructions, on this page, it's actually page 85, you're going to see that it says 80388-11G. Well, we're making block 11, perfect. It says mirror image, perfect, because we want to do a mirrored image. I always think about the letter J when it comes to applique. If I were to cut out the letter J and put it down, it would actually be reversed and it would not look like a J. That would be a J to U. It would go the other way. So you want to make sure that you're using the mirrored image. On our instructions, we actually give you both, so you have a lot of flexibility in what it is that you would like to make. So you have our applique templates, not just in normal, but also in mirror. For me, for today, I'm going to do the mirror. So the great thing is it says 80388-11G. That G is important, and I'll go through that in a second. Mirror. The reason why the G is important is because if I take my thread chart, I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So this G looks like the vase to me, so I was able to figure out that I want to use a purple vase today, so that's why I'm going to use purple. I did not use K-facet fabrics for this. I just chose some really sort of soft, solidy, cotton shot look fabrics so that you can easily see what it is that we're working on. The first thing I'm going to do is on here, on my applique fuse and fix, I see 12A and 12C over here, but I know that I'm working on block 11, so I'm going to cut out block 11. And I'm not going right on the line, I'm just doing a little bit of a rough cut around it. All right, I rough cut that, and that I know I'm going to iron onto that. I have my base block, which is going to be the yellow, and I have cut a piece of fusible woven, which I'm going to iron when I bring up my iron onto the back of this. So I'm going to set that aside. I also want to make sure that I mention a lot of our applique, we have sort of two ways of doing applique. A lot of our applique, you do the placement line, you put down your fabric, then you're going to do a tack down stitch, and then a cut line. But for this type of applique, we are actually going to be doing a blanket stitch, and you would see the tack down and cut line through that blanket stitch, and we don't want to do that. So I would not recommend cutting this in the hoop. This is all sort of a pre-cut applique. Again, though, if you want to do it that way, you are more than welcome to do it that way. But this is how we're going to do this one, and I really like it because it gives it a nice clean edge. And that applique fuse and fix is going to keep it from fraying. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to set this over, and I'm going to bring out my iron. All right, while we're waiting for the iron to heat up, I've thread my machine, and the question I have for you is, how do you stay organized when you have lots of different little applique pieces? I'm going to go ahead and do the first one, which is my base block fabric, which I have in a really pretty soft yellow today. And then, of course, my fusible woven. And I've cut out a 10-inch block. We're going to trim it down. If you read the instructions, you would trim it down to 8.5 by 8.5. But if I start with a 10-inch, then I can go through and trim it later. Rather than starting with the block precisely the right size, I find that I'm more likely to have a mistake when I go to put my whole quilt together. So I do it a little bit bigger, 10 by 10. On the fusible woven, if you want to, you can add steam. All right, we have a nice hot iron. I love that. I'm going to go ahead and set my base fabric or my base block fabric here off to the side. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to iron my vase to this scrap fabric that I have right here. And I'm going to go ahead and put my Applique Fuse and Fix, and I'm going to just set it down. I am not going to use steam. We used an inkjet printer to print out our Fuse and Fix. So if I were to use steam, it's actually going to smear those lines. And you're going to see I'm not ironing. I'm just holding it for about 10 seconds. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. And it's adhered, and that's it. And my lines are still clear, so I will be able to cut this out. And as you see here, I've actually done that for all of my designs that are going to be in this block. I might even give that one another touch. So I want to show really quick, we'll use our little top-down camera. These are all the ones that I cut out. I cut out all the ones that said 11 because, again, I'm going to be using block 11. What the digitizers and the team at OESD did, which I really love, is all of these are for the letter D. So when you go to print out the 3 or 4 pages, I think it was like 4 pages for block 11. When I printed out those on the Applique Fuse and Fix, I noticed that all the letters were actually grouped together. So I just cut out the whole grouping rather than each individual leaf. I am going to cut out each individual leaf, but for adhering it onto the fabric that I'm going to use for the leaves, it was just so easy. I just rough cut around the grouping of letter D and did that. So I have all of the ones that I need to do our block. And it means that my very next step is going to be hooping. So I got to get my grippy grid and put away my iron. So I'm using Ultra Clean and Tear, and I just got a great question from my producer, and she said, why not use Ultra Clean and Tear Plus, because you're going to float it. And I could do that, but I actually really like how soft and washable Ultra Clean and Tear is, and because this is going to be in a quilt, it's just faster and easier for me to use this rather than the Ultra Clean and Tear Plus. Not that much easier. The Ultra Clean and Tear Plus is very easy, but that's what I'm going to do today. You're noticing that this is a really big hoop. And that is an important thing to actually mention about this particular project. The average size of these blocks are going to come out, we're using a 10 by 10, we're going to cut it down to 8.5 by 8.5 inch block. But the designs themselves are actually, I was looking at the average yesterday with some of my colleagues here, and I think the average is something like almost 8 inches by almost 8 inches square. So for a lot of us, that means that we need to make sure that we're using the bigger hoop for our design. So in this particular case, I'm using a nice big hoop, and then I won't have any problem stitching out the project. Okay, here is my base of my block, my yellow fabric with my fusible woven ironed onto the back. I get so excited about this stuff that sometimes my brain works faster than my mouth. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, what I am going to do is, because I want this right in the middle, I am going to use the guidelines on the grippy grid. So I'm going to orientate that so it's more of a portrait, and then I'm going to use the lines on my hoop right here and here to line that up. Then I'm just going to take my 10-inch square, kind of fold it in half like this, bring it over, and line that right up, and then I'm going to use a little piece of tearaway tape here, a little piece of tearaway tape at the top, perfect. Okay, before we get started, I'm going to do something on my machine called a basting stitch. And the reason why I do the basting stitch is that it's going to keep all of my 3 layers here all together during the stitch out. I really like doing a basting stitch on my machine when I can, so I'm going to do that right now. I want to make sure that I note, if you do the basting stitch on your thread chart where it says 1, it's actually going to move the 1 to a 2 on the machine itself. So if you're following along and you've done a basting stitch, your numbers are going to be off by 1. And that is for some brands of machines, but not all brands of machines. Other brands might just do a basting stitch when you ask it to, but not change the order in which you are stitching out. And what a basting stitch is a very loose line, just keeping all the fabric sort of in place, that you would then take out before you sew your block. Here's our basting stitch, and it's going to depend, your basting stitch may look a little bit different depending on the hoop that you're using and the brand of machine. So now I'm going to take this back to the machine and do our first placement line. On your machine, you're going to see an image and it will show you what the first placement lines are going to be. In this instance, for block 11, it's going to be the flower. Okay, I have the placement line for all 3 of my little flowers, which I've chosen to do in a pink. So we get my pink scrap here that I have with my Fuse and Fix. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut out all 3 of these precisely. I am trying to trim just on the line. I love having different pairs of scissors for cutting different things. In the comments, tell me how many pairs of scissors you might have. Okay, I am going to use my perfect scoring tool because I find that it is easier to do a little X on the applique and then use that for peeling off the paper. Now, Applique, Fuse, and Fix is repositionable. So like if I got it down and I went, oh, that's not right, then I can peel it right back up and line it up exactly where I want it to be. And let me tell you, when we get going with some of these leaves, there are going to be times when you are so happy that Applique, Fuse, and Fix is repositionable. The other thing that I want to mention, which I realize I did not mention, is for a lot of us, we like to resize blocks. If we resize the printout, we're not resizing it on the embroidery machine. So do not resize. There, you can print it out on a simple 8.5 by 11 sheet of Applique, Fuse, and Fix, but you aren't going to want to resize it there. Print it at 100%. All right, now I'm going to take this right back over to the machine, and it's going to do the blanket stitch right around it, around each of the applique. The whole process is that we're going to cut out our leaves, cut them precisely, then we bring it over to the machine will do a placement stitch, then I peel off the Applique, Fuse, and Fix, I lay down my leaf, and then I'm going to bring it back over to a machine, it's going to do the blanket stitch, and we just keep doing that until we have our completed entire block. So it's the same process over and over and over again. We're going to do a placement line, we're going to trim up our block, place our blocks, blanket stitch, rinse and repeat until it's all done. Okay, all the embroidery is done, and so now we just have a few last minute things that we want to do before we say our block is complete. One of the things we're going to do is I'm going to trim up any loose threads, and then I'm going to seam rip this basting stitch and take it out of the hoop. It's so nice to have a loose basting stitch, makes it a lot easier to pull it out. And now I'm also going to remove my tearaway. I'm doing a loose job of tearing it out because once it gets into your quilt, it will actually disappear and wash away completely. All right, now that we have trimmed all the threads, I'm going to get my iron, give my block a final pressing on the perfect press cloth. And there we have our completed block. I love this block, it's so pretty. But let me show you some other fun inspiration that I have. I actually have, I think, 6 pieces of inspiration around here. So I'm going to show you some different things that you can do with this collection, besides the gorgeous quilt that is behind me. If you were to make the quilt, before I go to that, if you were to make the quilt, you would just trim this down by, to 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And in the instruction booklet, there is a guide to show you what blocks that you can make, along with a diagram showing how you would put these blocks together to make your quilt. And then when you sew all your blocks together into rows, then of course you'd have a completed quilt top, and then you can quilt and bind as desired. But let's get on to some inspiration. I have 6 pieces around. Have you spotted all 6 pieces? I think there's 6. I might have miscounted. The first one I want to show is that our colleague Rachel made this beautiful zippered pouch using just 1 block. Isn't that fun? And she also did it in a similar color scheme to what we did with our block, and it gives it a really nice, fun feel. Another piece of inspiration I have over here, let me bring my teacup, because of course I'm going to need to have a cup of tea after all this hard work. So I made an awesome little tea cozy. Remember those? I had them, I know my grandmother had it on her teapot on her stove, certainly in my childhood in the 70s. So 2 different blocks, and I just quilted it and turned it into a tea cozy. Another fun inspiration piece that I have over here a skirt. This is my daughter-in-law was having fun watching me sew, and so this is a fun skirt that she wanted upcycled that she found at the Goodwill, and I just put a couple of the blocks, the tulip blocks, on there, and then mushrooms, because she loves mushrooms. And how fun is that? Let's see, I have also, to go with my tea cozy, this is using this same block, and I just did it 4 different ways for like a little tea topper. Now I'm really ready for my tea party. So many fun and different ways that you could use the K-Facet Leafy Appliques Quilt by K-Facet. The last inspiration I think I have over here, and this is doing it where the fabrics are plain because the background fabric was so crazy that I thought, well, what if I just did the flowers in just 1 fabric? So that's really fun. I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, the skirt's 5. Oh, the quilt, that's number 6. So many different projects that you can make using the Leafy Applique Quilt by K-Facet. I really want to see what you do. Please tell me in the chat what you're excited to make or what's inspiring you. Remember, this is a blanket stitch applique, which means that there aren't 2 rows of stitching. You are going to have a placement line, a blanket stitch. You want to pre-cut your applique, and for the applique fuse and fix, it's repositionable. And if you're going to do it in your printer, do it 1 sheet at a time with a nice cool printer that hasn't been doing a lot of printing, because you don't want to upset the glue on that applique fuse and fix. Those are the tips. We also have a bundle. That's really the fun part, isn't it? So in your bundle, you're going to get the Ultra Clean and Tear. You are going to get the fusible woven in these nice 2 big sizes right here for your big hoops. And you're going to get the applique fuse and fix. And you're going to get all of these for a limited time only, $59.99. So you want to jump on that super fast because it is for a limited time. Oh, that is so much fun. So much fun. I'm so glad that you joined me today, and make sure that you see even more educational content that we have on YouTube, and we have a project hub on our website. And of course, I would love it if you liked and subscribed this video. And then if that's not enough for you, I can't wait to see you over at the Perfect Stitch. That's our Facebook group, and you want to join that for even more inspiration and lots of conversation in our community of embroiderers. I really appreciate you being here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.